You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Hello, I'm Stephen Willis from the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, and I'm joined today by Zach Berry, recruiting extraordinaire from the Ole Miss Spirit and On3. Zach, how you doing, buddy?
I'm good, man. Appreciate you having me back.
Yeah, well, I had to because you just got back from Tampa, Florida at the OT7 7-on-7 tournament, which Deuce Knight got MVP of. And you put out a little bit of a nugget, said there was a little bit of a consensus that people at the tournament did not necessarily think he was going to end up at Notre Dame.
Yeah, a lot of Notre Dame people didn't like that.
Yeah.
It was I had multiple people in my industry. I had multiple prospects. I talked to, there were a lot of, moms and dads, coaches, 7-on-7 coaches, handlers, whatever you want to call them. I had people coming up to me completely unprompted, asking me what I thought. And I said, hey man, I think it's a toss up right now. He hasn't ruled out Ole Miss. Because look, nothing's stopping Deuce Knight from just saying, hey, I'm shutting everything down. I'm going to Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
I do think he's legitimately torn. I think there's a lot to like with Notre Dame and what that degree from that university offers once your football career is over. And Marcus Freeman and that staff, it's a young group. They've done a nice job. They've added a lot of pieces to potentially go around Deuce Knight. But on the flip side, Ole Miss has done the same. But yeah, it was interesting with so many people asking me what I thought, and then I would tell them basically that, and then they would say, "Yeah, I think he's just going to go to Ole Miss. I think he's going to flip." So it was interesting.
Yeah, and has Deuce Knight official to Ole Miss, or has it just been unofficials at this point?
No, just unofficials. When I talked to him at the event, and we've talked plenty of times, basically he said, hey, maybe he will take an official, but just being a Mississippi guy, and a lot of the Mississippi guys say this, where it's like, hey, it's just up the road. If I want to go, I can go. Like, it doesn't have to be a big production of an official visit where you book a flight, a hotel, all of that. And I think that's kind of indicative of the relationship he has with the staff. It's very laid back. Ole Miss under Kiffin has never been one to press kids, to push them for, hey, we need an answer. We need to know by this date. Or, all right, if you don't come OV here by the end of June, like, we're moving on. Like, no, it's never been the approach with Kiffin. So yeah, it's a very, like, hey, doors always open policy for Ole Miss. So no OV set. He's going to Notre Dame this weekend for his OV, and then he goes out to LA for the Elite 11 finals.
Yeah, and you would have to think that Notre Dame is going to try and get him to shut it down this weekend, right?
You would think so, but I mean, hell, they've had like 15 opportunities. It seems like he's there every weekend. And I don't think there was a point where Notre Dame had a no visit policy like Clemson has. I think Marcus Freeman has eased up on that a bit. And just to clarify for those that may not understand, for a no visit policy where if you're committed to Notre Dame, you can't go anywhere else. Otherwise, they would, I wouldn't say pull the offer, but they would question your commitment. If you remember a couple of years ago, Jerry and Ely basically decommitted from Ole Miss just so he could go take an OV to Clemson because Dabo doesn't allow OVs from guys who are committed elsewhere. So I would imagine Notre Dame would probably like a firm answer from him this weekend. But I don't know that staff and how they operate well enough to know if that's what they're going for.
Yeah, it's a weird situation in recruiting, and honestly, they've created this whole thing themselves. But basically, if you're a quarterback, especially a quarterback, it is important that you find the place that you want to go and have your safety school. And people, whoever that might be. It's not an insult thing. That's just to ensure that you have a spot. And then you go shopping, essentially, is the way this works. And honestly, that got Keelan Russell in a little bit of trouble at the On3 Elite Combine whenever he said, hey, I'm just waiting on a school to flip me, but until then, I'm committed to SMU. Well, lo and behold, like 4 days later, he was committed to Alabama.
Yeah. And, and Keelan's a good kid. I think that the way he phrased it probably got twisted a little bit. He was very upfront for the last couple months that he was interested in other schools. He went to Ole Miss a couple times. He was very interested and obviously, committed to Alabama because of what Kalen DeBoer does offensively. But yeah, I mean, and that's, whether that's what he meant or not. And that's just kind of what we're looking at now in this modern era of college football. It's about NIL. It's about, hey, I want to come play football for you, but what can you do for me? What can you do for my brand? Because, look, the percentage of guys that go to the NFL is very, very, very low. And the percentage of guys who go to the NFL and are successful is very low. So, look, man, I'm not going to blame a guy for having a contingency plan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's just a situation now that I explain to people is like, hey, signings at this point in this transfer portal war is what commitments used to be. Now, commitments now is something completely different. It's really weird as you try to understand what's going on. It's been a while since I worked in recruiting, like 20 years, but it's amazing how much this has changed.
Yeah. And, you had, guys at OT7 that were, that have, deals with brands already, which good for them. Hey man, go get as much money as you can. I'm not going to knock the hustle, but it is different. It's still, I remind people that it's been like this for a long time. Now it's just in the forefront and you see it and you hear about it more. But it is a little different with, endorsement deals and, Adidas was there front and center at OT7. They were talking to athletes. They released a kind of a, I can't remember what they called it. It was like the AD0 class where they basically have athletes signed to Adidas, as part of a class. Winston Watkins is part of that class. Ole Miss Target, who was on an official visit over the weekend at Ole Miss. So yeah, I think it's cool. I know some people hate it. I don't think it's going to ruin anything. I think it's great for a student athlete to have these opportunities. And, it's just another way for brands to embed themselves into college football.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it doesn't affect anything that's going on, but what it does affect is how you interpret certain things, because things have different meanings in the way they go. I mean, that's what you actually have to learn. At the end of the day, who plays for your laundry for your college football team, that doesn't necessarily change that much.
No. And I understand how it's different for people now. And I understand why some might dislike it, but I mean, come on, you're still going to watch the game on Saturday. I mean, especially if your team's good, you're going to get over it pretty quickly when you're.
Yeah, I want to see the Ole Miss fan this year that puts his foot down. It's like, I'm boycotting.
Yeah. I mean, hey, get stand for something, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. So Ole Miss had a really big official visit weekend over the weekend. Several prospects were on campus for Ole Miss, and kind of the name that kept bouncing around that I kept hearing was Elijah Melendez. Apparently that visit went really well. I think you did a story, or it might have been Inside the Rebels. If I have it wrong, I apologize, but it says basically they're even with Miami at this point. And Melendez, we looked at his video on my show last week. He's an old style thumper that Miami made their bones on whenever they had their rise 20 years ago. He's that type of a linebacker.
Yeah. I mean, I'll say this, it's probably a good size to be when you're going to be a senior in high school. You're probably going to be pretty successful. Looks to be every bit of 6'2", 225, built really well, moves sideline to sideline really well, plays down in Florida. for Osceola.
Likes contact. He's 20 minutes up the road from me.
Yeah, he's the guy you want in the middle of the defense. But Ole Miss had him in for an unofficial earlier this year. Kevin Smith, who's a Florida guy, they hit it off, and then Pete Golding is in this one as well. And when I talked to Elijah after the OV, TJ Dudley also kind of playing recruiter here. He's tight with him. He said they've been friends for a little bit now, and he was on the visit. Put the recruiter hat on, talk to him about what it's like to be at Ole Miss, what it's like to be in that locker room, and kind of what goes in with the pro mindset aspect of Lane Kiffin's program. But yeah, I mean, I think right now I'm getting really close to thinking of putting in a prediction for him to flip. He told me that he went to Auburn, went to Ole Miss, and then he will do Oklahoma and then Miami, and then he's going to decide after that. So I think at this point, he's going to hear everyone out, and then he'll go back to Miami and, probably say, all right, this is what I got on the table. What can y'all do? So I do think that he was very honest with his visit. And he said, man, I loved it. It's certainly a place I could see myself in. I fit, like the way he phrased it was like, I never questioned the fit at Ole Miss. So yeah, I mean, I think the combination of Pete Golding and that reputation he has with elite defenders and putting guys in position to get to the NFL, and then just that really close relationship with Kevin Smith, who is a Florida guy. I think that's the 1-2 punch here for Ole Miss. Auburn really knocked it out of the park, and then, man, the weekend after, Ole Miss, big counter punch. We'll see what happens at Oklahoma, and then what Miami ultimately does to try to hold on to him.
Now, I have a theory. Now, it's an educated theory, but it's a theory. And that is that all of these players that are coming to Ole Miss and are interested in Ole Miss from the state of Florida is a result of the work that Austin Simmons is doing behind the scenes. I think he is taking a leadership in this situation, because a lot of people need to realize this would be Austin's class. These would be his guys that he would be going through. So he probably does have relationships with a good number of them.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. Yeah, I mean, he's very vocal on social media and on visits. I mean, the guys that are from the state of Florida, you mentioned Melendez, Winston Watkins was there.
Keon Young.
Dante Core was in town. Keon Young. I mean, the staff has a lot of connections there. But, yeah, when guys are there and they're in it, they're already in the program, and they can tell you, hey, this is really how it is. I know this is what they say on the OV, but we can confirm it. Like, this is how we go about our business each and every day. So that's good to kind of validate that message from the staff when you can have guys that are there and they can say, yeah, this is how it is.
Yeah, and it's pretty cool. And, over the weekend, Elijah Melendez, when he put his pictures up, like he put his OV pictures up on Saturday, which lets you know that the kid's having a good time. He immediately put up 4 pictures, but that immediately got retweeted by Keon Young. And they're 20 minutes down the road from each other as well. So there might be a little bit of relationship there as well. I don't know about that, but like I said, it is just kind of a working theory of everything that's going on. And Florida has a chance to snowball a little bit for Lane Kiffin and the Ole Miss Rebels. Anyway, thank you for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We go to the top 5 Ole Miss head coaches. We put Zach Berry on the hot seat next. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Maybe you can bet on the Ole Miss Rebels over-under on wins, which currently sit at 9.5, or perhaps you're interested in Ole Miss being minus 122 to make the college football playoff. But maybe your Jackson Dart flavor, the flavor of the week for Betty is Jackson Dart at plus 1,500 to win the Heisman Trophy. Maybe that's what you're looking for. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, it's America's #1 sportsbook. Are you watching Fox Sports and ESPN on your TV all day and have to turn down the volume with all of that screaming and shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you each and every single day to bring you the biggest stories without all of that screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis and opinions and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. All right, Zach Berry is going to go on the hot seat. The topic today is the top 5 Ole Miss football coaches of all time. And we've gotten to the point now, if this was a list that was done, the top 5 coaches back when Billy Brewer was the coach, it would be like a list of 3. It's like people dropping a Harry Mayer or something like that as the coach. Yeah, but now there's enough coaches to where you can do a legit top 5, and there could be people that are left off. The way this works, we do a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, a true countdown. All the way down into the beginning. Now, whenever I do my show, it's 1 through 5, but it's my show, my rules. So here we go. Number 5.
All right. And just, I had to clarify with you. I'm assuming we're going for strict results here and not impact, or are they kind of all encompassing?
It's kind of all encompassing. This is your kind of your list.
And I will say, Stephen, this was an awfully depressing exercise to do because it falls off pretty hard. If it kind of an all-encompassing results mixed with impact, and I'll tweak it here, or I guess I'll kind of give my reasoning why he is at 5 and not at 4. I'm gonna go David Cutcliffe at 5. I mean, he recruited and coached, basically the all-time greatest at Ole Miss, which I did catch a lot of flack when I was on here last time and gave my top 5 quarterbacks, which I should have clarified. I went with modern era because I know a lot of people are mad I didn't mention Archie. Yes, I do think Archie was very good. But yeah, Cutcliffe he recruited Eli Manning. I know that a lot was made about, well, he could have gone anywhere he wanted. He wanted to go with his dad or where his dad went to school. Got that done and was just consistently good. Nothing. 8, 7, 7, 7, 10 win, and then the drop off 4 and 7 before getting canned. A lot of that was due to Eli Manning leaving, and that team was loaded with a lot of seniors, and then just a little outdated recruiting caught up with him by the end. But just a remarkably consistent coach, and then talking with a lot of people, kind of crowdsourced this a little bit. My good buddy Gray Hardison over at Red Cup, he mentioned once he left Ole Miss, he was good at Duke. So that kind of, confirmed that hey, he's a pretty damn good coach. But yeah, I got Cutcliffe at 5.
Yeah, you have a situation, him missing on Michael Spurlock. That was the reason for that 2004 season. Whenever he missed as a quarterback there, that happened. And then you had the health problems and all of that with David Cutcliffe that they found out and him getting to Duke. All right, number 4.
All right. Might be a little controversial, mainly because of just kind of who he is now. I'm going to go Tommy Tuberville. Might be a little hyperbolic. I think that this Ole Miss program probably looks just very, very different if Tommy Tuberville doesn't go to Ole Miss and kind of bail them out after probably one of the worst NCAA probations handed down outside of SMU. Just scholarships taken away, no TV. And Tommy Tuberville, recruited one of the better recruiting classes in the history of the program, and kind of brought them back to, not the forefront or not, national relevancy, but they were right there, win 8 games in 97, win the Motor City Bowl, beat Chad Pennington and Randy Moss. And, not a ton of wins, but I think that going 25-20 in 4 years, with everything that had happened before he arrived, I think is something that needs to be considered. And I think, kind of leaning more towards the impact here versus results with Tuberville. So I got him at 4, and just what he did, how he recruited, got some legitimate NFL star power to Ole Miss when it was deemed pretty much impossible back then.
Yes, and the problem with that is, for me, I would never put him on a top 5 list for the way he left. It was a situation with what he did, and
Yeah.
because I actually worked in that building in 2004, so that was like 6 years after it happened. Coach Cut was still there, the coach that replaced him, and Tuberville just stole all of the recruiting files and walked out and took everything. It's just the way he left. I'll put it like this: in 2004, when Auburn got snubbed for the national title game and everybody was losing their mind, I smiled a little bit that day. All right. So
I mean, it's last thing on Tuberville. I mean, that the class of Deuce McAllister, Romero Miller, Terrence Metcalf, Ken Lucas, I mean, those guys could have gone anywhere. I mean, Romero Miller was parade All-American. Those guys could have gone anywhere, and he got them to Ole Miss. So I think that.
Yeah, what more impressive is he found walk-ons like Matt Luke and Walker Jones and filled up the roster whenever they had all the scholarship limitations to field a competitive team. And that was the more impressive thing to me that he did. But Rufus French, Romero Miller, all of those guys, he did a really good job. He just undid all of it in a night.
Yeah. All right, number 3. I'm gonna go Hugh Freeze. I mean, just that was where Ole Miss recruited at an extremely high level. We were just talking about Tuberville getting it done. More modern era recruiting with Hugh Freeze. Just figuring out a way to fix everything after Ed Orgeron. Houston Nutt had a couple highs, but then a little more lows on the way out. Hugh Freeze got them to national relevancy, not only in recruiting, but winning. We all know about the back-to-back wins over Alabama. Still had the head scratchers here and there, losing to Memphis and, the debacle with, Arkansas, pick your year with that one. But you can't deny the impact that he had on, College game day, going to Oxford for the first time and recruiting well at quarterback and, pre-transfer portal, getting a guy like Chad Kelly to go to Ole Miss. I think that he's a pretty solid number 3 for me.
Yeah, Hugh Freeze is hard to argue. I told had Max Chadwick on my show that it's going to air next week, and I was like, hey, at Ole Miss, it's the weirdest thing. Offensive innovation is what sells. Johnny Vaught, Hugh Freeze, Lane Kiffin, they're all offensive gurus, and that sells. It's just a really good fit at Ole Miss. Whenever you get into trouble, even David Cutcliffe, an offensive guy, when you get into trouble is whenever you try to square peg round hole, going with a defense hard-nosed guy. That happens, that kind of falls flat. I think Billy Brewer was the best that we had there.
Yeah, old school, a guy that it was a good combination of a guy that everybody loved and got it done too. It's tough, Matt Luke. Everybody liked Matt Luke. Didn't get it done. But Billy Brewer was a good mix of that. Just a very humble, wholesome guy that was all about business in between the lines and still was able to win some games. He was a close one at 5, but I just went Cutcliffe just because of the results, and obviously landing Eli Manning was big there. And couple plays here, a couple plays there from getting Ole Miss to Atlanta for the first time.
Yeah. Number 2.
I thought 1 and 2 were easy. Lane Kiffin at number 2. I mean, just a modern era savant with the portal, with NIL, with brand awareness, building Ole Miss up to what it is today. From everything, top to bottom. I mean, just the transfer portal, utilizing his dog as a way to build the brand, and just, basically, winning 11 games for the first time ever. Nobody's ever done that. And then now you've built probably the best roster in the program's history. And this season is arguably the most hyped ever. I think Lane Kiffin's an easy one to put at number 2, for obvious reasons that we'll get to for who's at number 1.
Yes, number 1.
Number 1, Johnny Vaught. I'm sure that will make everyone happy that when I left Archie off, Johnny Vaught. I mean, he's got the hardware, he's got titles, and arguably one of the best teams ever was coached by him. I don't think a lot of people know enough about the 1959 team. One of the best college football teams of all time, regardless of era. I mean, just you want to talk about a defense first. I mean, just a perfect defense. I mean, it was truly just unreal of how good that defense was. And it's a shame that, it happened with Billy Cannon running the punt back. But I mean, that was a team that was just unheard of with how good it was on defense. And I'm trying to find the statistic here, but I don't think
they did not give up a touchdown that year.
Right. Yeah. No touchdowns allowed, which is just absurd. But yeah, I mean, until Lane Kiffin gets a SEC title or, a college football playoff semifinal appearance, it's pretty obvious here that Johnny Vaught is number 1. And look, I don't think a lot of people would argue that.
No.
If we're, comparing eras, it's very different, obviously, in the late 50s, 60s. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a pretty clear cut number 1 here.
Yeah, I think the 59 team gave up 21 points. They gave up an interception, Billy Cannon's punt return, and I think they gave up a kickoff return.
Yeah. That year. Bill Connolly does a great breakdown of all the teams, and I can't find it, but he had a lot of really good nuggets about that team. But yeah, just a crazy, just ridiculously loaded defense that was just nails. I mean, we talk a lot about the Landshark defense and how good that defense was in the modern era. But yeah, I mean, that team to go 10-1 and I mean, just remarkable. I think it says 21 points all year, 3 touchdowns off special teams or a turnover. No one scored on a drive of double-digit plays all season. They averaged 31.8 points per game, which was 3rd in the country. The SP Plus ratings had them as 3rd best of the 20th century. LSU needed multiple red zone stops and maybe the greatest punt return of all time to win 7-3. But Ole Miss turned around and whipped LSU in the Sugar Bowl 21-0. Bill Connolly talks a lot about that Syracuse team that same year that won. Back then, they're 9 polls or whatever it was. So Syracuse claims a title. Ole Miss claims a title. That was something that Bill Connolly, I think he phrased it as like 2 ships passing in the night, where Syracuse was all offense and Ole Miss was all about defense. So just a pretty cool part of history for Ole Miss to be involved in there.
Yeah. And I always had to like conversations with my uncle, who's a big Nebraska person, because they're also pretty high on that list. Because at that time, it was like the 71 team that popped up there as well with like Johnny Rogers and that. So
yeah,
thank you. Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Zach Berry from On3, Ole Miss Spirit. What do you got going on this week, bud?
I mean, we just got more recruiting. Ole Miss will have more visitors this weekend. And Lead 11 finals next week. We'll be keeping a close eye on Deuce Knight. And but yeah, the staff is busy, man. You got to tip your cap to what Kelvin Bolden and Alex Brown and Billy Glasscock and Alex Collins and all those guys are doing over there in that building, along with the everyday staff. It's last weekend was pretty impressive with what was in town. We'll have more interviews, more stories out. You can catch all that at omspirit.com, as pretty much talked to everybody that was in town last week. So just getting those interviews typed up for you. But yeah, we'll have full coverage of another weekend in recruiting and more camps this weekend. And we'll have some baseball portal stuff as well.
Yeah, Zach Berry, Mr. Ole Miss Recruiting. I guess I can coin him as that, Mr. Ole Miss Recruiting, joining the show. So thank you very much, bud, and we'll talk to you next time, man.
Yeah, man. Appreciate you.